You know the feeling, that endless cycle, where you notice something in your life isn't working. A relationship pattern, a career ceiling, a way you keep showing up that you don't like. And because you're someone who takes responsibility, you get to work on it. You reflect. You understand the pattern. You can name it. You can trace it back to where it started. You can explain it to your counselor or your therapist, like you're watching a movie of your own life. You can go to your friends in your church group and they reflect back some nice sounding platitudes about having faith and trusting in the plan, or how you just need to focus on God more. They offer you their own problems and grievances, and you start to think to yourself, maybe my life isn't so bad after all. And for a moment, the insight feels like progress. You feel lighter. You feel like you've turned a corner. And then a week later, you find yourself in the same rut. Same patterns, same situations, same negative dialogue. And you can't explain why. It's not because you forgot the insight. You remember it perfectly. It just doesn't seem to reach the thing that's generating the behavior. And here's the part that makes it so maddening, is that you're not someone who avoids the work. You're probably the most self-aware, hardest working person in most rooms that you walk into. You've read the books, you've filled the journals, you've bought the programs, you've listened to the sermons and the podcast. You've had genuine breakthroughs, moments where something actually shifted and you thought, this is it. I finally get it. And the thing you've been trying to change is still there. Quieter maybe, more sophisticated in how it shows up, but still there. This video is about why. Not the motivational answer, not you need more discipline or you haven't found the right morning routine yet. The actual structural reason why intelligent, self-aware people can understand their patterns completely and still be run by them. Let me describe something and you tell me if it sounds familiar. There are two versions of how you're doing. There's the one you give when people ask. Things are good. I'm getting there. There's some stuff I'd change, but all in all, I got no complaints. And then the other person nods with a polite smile and gives you a similar version of the exact same answer. And you smile back. It feels good, validating on some level, even though your conversation never really touched the deeper stuff. But then, after you part ways, you're left by yourself in a moment of stillness. No phone, no noise, just you being honest with yourself in the silence of your own thoughts. And in those moments, something else comes through. And it sounds something like, this isn't what I imagined it'd be. There has to be more to life than this. I'm not sure that I even recognize the life that I've built or the person I've become. I'm exhausted, not the kind of tiredness that sleep fixes, but something deeper. And there's a part of me underneath the obligations, the roles, the performing, that hasn't had room to breathe in a long time. And the distance between who people see when they look at me and what I actually feel when I'm alone is getting harder to ignore. So you do what you've always done. You look for the next thing, the next framework, the next book that might finally explain why someone as self-aware as you still feels stuck. And for a while, you feel yourself moving again. The new language, the new lens, the new insight, it feels like progress. But then the old pattern comes back. Maybe wearing different clothes, maybe showing up in a different area of your life, but the same architecture underneath it, the same feeling, the same ceiling. And you start to wonder, what if the problem isn't that I haven't found the right answer? What if the problem is that I've been looking at the wrong level? The conventional explanation for why you're stuck, whether that's coaching, therapy, self-help, spirituality, goes something like this. You just haven't found the right knowledge yet. You haven't found the truth, the thing that will actually change you. You need more accountability. You need better habits, more consistency. Or you understand it intellectually, but you haven't done the work to apply it, whatever that means. And all of those explanations share one assumption that almost nobody questions. They assume that the problem is cognitive, that somewhere in your thinking, in your beliefs, your mindset, your story about the world, there's a bug in the code. And if you can just find it and rewrite it, the problem changes automatically. That assumption is wrong. Not partially wrong, structurally wrong. And it's the reason you can spend years in therapy, read 50 books, hear a great message at church every week, have 100 breakthroughs, and still wake up running the same pattern. Let me show you what I mean. Think about the last time you had a genuine insight about yourself, A real one, the kind where you saw something clearly that you hadn't seen before and you were like, this is it. This is the insight that changes everything. Got it? Now think about what happened next. Not an hour later, not the next day, in the minutes, right after that insight landed. Your mind got busy again. Almost immediately, the argument started. But my situation is different, but I can't afford to slow down. But what about, it's almost like something inside of you sensed that the insight was a threat and mobilized against it before you even knew it was happening. The conscious mind had the breakthrough, but something else put up a fight. And that something else won. Not because you're weak, not because you lack discipline, but because the thing that's running the pattern doesn't live in your thinking. It lives somewhere that your thinking can't reach. So there are 3 layers where patterns actually live. And most approaches to change, even the good ones, only address the first. The first layer is the cognitive layer. The stories and beliefs you hold about yourself and the world. This is where therapy works. This is where journaling works. This is where most personal development operates. You can surface patterns at this level that were genuinely invisible before, and that's valuable. But here's the thing. This layer is downstream of the ones beneath it. The stories you tell yourself are being generated by something deeper. Rewriting the story doesn't change what's generating the story. It's like the warning lights on the dashboard of your car. You can hit the button that says ignore and make the light go out, but that's not the origin of the problem. The real source of the damage is somewhere under the hood, and you need a mechanic to see the problem that you can't understand. And so all the major pain points in our life, the relationship problems, the health scares, the money struggles, they're all warning lights that are alerting us to what's going on inside of us. The situation is just reflecting back to us our deepest beliefs and destructive patterns so that we can become aware of it. Because life is just an external mirror of our internal state. The second layer is deeper, and it's the one that explains most of what you've been experiencing. I call it the emotional energetic layer. Beneath your thoughts, there's an entire layer of your experience that doesn't operate in language. It's the unprocessed emotions and experiences stored in your body. Not as memories that you can name with your psychologist, but as tension, as numbness, as the chronic low-level hum that never fully turns off. The tightness in your chest that you've had so long that you think that's just how you feel. The jaw you clench without knowing that you're doing it. The hypervigilance that runs in the background, always scanning for what could go wrong, what you might be missing, how you might be being perceived. You've been living with that hum for so long that you think that's just how life feels. It isn't. This layer cannot be reasoned with. You cannot think your way into releasing something that was never stored as a thought. It has to be met at the level where it lives, in the body, through the breath, through presence, through the kind of attention that most people have never learned to give themselves. And here's the part that makes it so persistent. Your body is chemically addicted to its familiar emotional states. The striving, the low-level dread, the not enoughness. These aren't just habits you can interrupt with a new routine. At a cellular level, they are who your body believes that you are. When you start to shift, when an insight lands and something inside you actually begins to relax, the body interprets the unfamiliar state as danger. Even if that state is peace, even if it's calm, the body doesn't know the difference between what's unfamiliar and what's unsafe. So it pulls you back to what it knows. That's why you get home from the retreat and on Monday morning, you feel that same pit in your stomach when the alarm goes off. Not because the retreat didn't work, but because your body didn't trust the new state long enough to let it become the new baseline. The third layer goes even deeper. These are patterns you didn't choose and didn't consciously create. Loyalties inherited from your family system. Traumas carried from previous generations or past lifetimes. Unspoken contracts that were never spoken because they didn't need to be. They were absorbed. We don't talk about money in this family. Men in this family don't show emotion. Nobody here gets to be too successful. That's not who we are. You absorb these before you even had language for them, before you could question them. And they explain why highly conscious people, People who have done real, genuine, deep work on themselves still find themselves repeating patterns that they consciously rejected years ago. The pattern isn't yours, but you're carrying it. And you'll keep carrying it until you can see that clearly enough to set it down. Now, there's a question I ask people that tends to change the entire conversation. Not because it's particularly clever, but because it's a question that almost nobody thinks to ask themselves honestly. What would you lose if the situation actually changed? Not what you would gain, what you would lose. Sit with that for a moment. Think about the pattern in your life that keeps showing up. The thing you say you want to change, the situation, the dynamic, the recurring experience. Now ask yourself, with as much honesty as you can access, what am I getting out of this? What does this situation give me that I haven't been willing to look at? I know how that sounds. Nobody wants to hear that their suffering is doing something for them. But this isn't about blame. It's a structural observation. If a pattern keeps returning despite your best efforts to change it, some part of your system, operating below your conscious awareness, is getting something from its continuation. Safety, certainty, an identity that, however painful, at least feels familiar. The answers I've heard when this question finally lands are not comfortable. People are usually shocked at what comes out of their mouth because they're the kind of thing that you wouldn't want to say out loud. I would have to stop hating myself. Imagine that. Self-hatred so woven into the fabric of who you believe you are that releasing it feels like losing something. I would lose my identity as the one who always struggles, the victim, the person who gets to complain. Who are you without that story? And the one that stops people in their tracks more than any other. I would have to stop playing small. I would have to acknowledge how powerful and how capable I actually am. That one changes everything, because it means you're not stuck because something is wrong with you. You're stuck because some part of you knows exactly what you're capable of. And that is more terrifying than staying where you are. The hiding is the pattern. The smallness is the addiction. Every persistent pattern in your life at some level is trying to serve you. So the question isn't if it's happening, it's whether or not you're willing to look at what it is. Now I know this can all seem abstract, but I know this because I've lived inside of it for most of my life. I spent my entire life into my mid-20s chasing validation through performance. Hockey was my thing since I was a little kid, and my approach to every practice, to every game, to every season was built around a single belief that I never thought to question. If I perform well enough, I'll earn my way to the feeling that I'm after. I'll get approval and validation from others. I'll feel accomplished. I'll feel like people respect me, like I did enough to make other people proud. But the goalposts move constantly. I chased them constantly, and the arrival never came. There was always another mountain to climb, another person who was doing it better, another reason that I wasn't quite there yet. And here's the thing, I could see the pattern the whole way. I wasn't oblivious. I knew on some level that no amount of performance was going to fill the thing that I was trying to fill. I'd heard people say it countless times in books and podcasts and interviews, achieving more won't make you any happier. But seeing it didn't stop it. Insight alone didn't change it. Because it wasn't running in my thinking, it was running in my body, in my identity, in everything that I had built on top of it. So I kept chasing it because that's who I was. It had to be taken away from me forcefully for me to realize how disconnected I'd become from myself, and to recognize how much I'd depleted myself chasing goals that were never actually mine. I see the same pattern in the people that I work with now. A client of mine, she's a business owner, and she had neglected her accounting for almost 3 years. The story she told herself was, "I'm too busy. I'll take care of it later." It sounded reasonable. She is genuinely busy. But 3 years of avoidance isn't a time management problem. Something else was running it. What it was actually about was the unwillingness to confront what she didn't want to see, especially around the money. And when we addressed the actual root, Not the accounting, not the productivity, the actual thing underneath. She completed 3 years of accounting in just a few weeks. And then, without even thinking about it, she started hitting her health goals that she'd also been putting off for years. She started going on walks, prepping healthy meals, scheduling yoga classes, finding time to meditate. 2 completely different areas of her life shifted from one structural change. That's not a productivity story. That's what happens when you address the right level. The accounting and the health goals shared the same exact root. The root shifts and everything downstream rearranges. And this is real change. I know for me, I always imagined that change would arrive as some cinematic moment, those big mountaintop experiences where nothing was ever the same after. I chased those peak moments for years, and sometimes they actually came, and they faded away just as quickly. What actually happened was much quieter than anything I expected. There was no dramatic before and after. What there was, and this is stranger and more profound than I think any epiphany that I ever had, is the slow realization that my baseline had shifted. Slowly but surely, I had become a new person. I noticed it in small moments. Those intrusive, negative thoughts that used to run all day long were suddenly gone. They were quiet. Not because I fought them or suppressed them, but because whatever was generating them had released its grip. My breath was deeper. My chest was more open. Decisions that would have taken me weeks of agonizing just came. Things worked out, not because I forced them to, but because I stopped getting in my own way. Just recently, I moved apartments. You might notice that I'm in a new space here. Now, the old version of me would have been in full hypervigilance. Spreadsheets with cost breakdowns. Every complex compared, side by side. Weeks of second guessing, and then even after signing the lease, that old familiar loop of, what if I made the wrong choice? This time, I looked at one place. My body and my intuition told me immediately where to look. And when I walked in, my breath deepened, everything relaxed. Not because it was perfect on paper, but because something inside of me recognized it as home. So I went with it. And when the delays came, the paperwork, the processing, the AI system that only recognized pay stubs from a traditional employer, the old anxiety wasn't there. No more, why does this always happen to me? Or why can't I catch a break? I just trusted that it would work out even better than I could orchestrate. And it did. I managed to get 2 more weeks of free rent on top of what they were already offering. That's what I mean when I talk about this work. Not a peak experience, not a revelation on a mountaintop, just an ordinary Tuesday afternoon that flows differently because something fundamental has shifted. It didn't come from a big moment. It came when I started being okay with my circumstances exactly as they are. Not in a performative way, but actually arriving in my life as it is. And discovering that the war that I'd been waging with my own experience was actually the thing that was generating most of my suffering. Now, this goes against everything you'll hear on the hustle culture of personal development, but I'll say it plainly. Life is not meant to feel hard, at least not in the way that most people accept as normal. Not that hard work isn't valuable, that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about the grinding quality of it, the nonstop pushing, the hypervigilance, the sense that if you stop forcing, everything will fall apart. That's not strength. That's an addiction to struggle. And most people have built their entire identity on top of it. When somebody's operating from wholeness instead of lack, not performing wholeness, not using it as a spiritual bypass, but genuinely operating from a different place, efforts become dramatically more effective. Solutions show up faster. Doors open that were invisible before. Not as a reward for earning anything, but because you're no longer pouring all of your energy into an invisible war with yourself. So here's where I'll leave you. You can't think your way out of this one. Not because you're not motivated enough, not because you're not smart enough, but because thinking itself is aimed at the wrong level. The patterns that keep showing up in your life aren't living in your thoughts. They're living in your body, in your nervous system, in the structures that were built long before you had any say in the matter. And they respond to a different kind of attention than the one that you've been giving it. And so you don't need another strategy. You don't need more information, more accountability. You don't need more discipline. You need to address it at the right level. So if what I've described resonates and you want the full framework, a map of how these layers actually work, and the terrain where real change actually happens. I wrote a guide called The Architecture of Change. It's $17 and it goes deeper into everything I walked through today in an experiential way that you can sit with and apply to your own situation. The link is in the description. And if you're someone who recognizes through reading, if what you want right now isn't a framework, but somebody just naming your experience precisely enough that you feel seen, I wrote a short letter for you. It's free, it's not a sales pitch, it's the kind of thing I wish somebody had given me when I was in the middle of all this. That link is in the description as well. 2 different starting points, depending on what feels right for you. The work begins when you're ready.